Goedenavond, bonsoir, good evening. Nederlands is niet gemakkelijk voor mij, het is heel moeilijk. Ik heb zoveel respect voor de schoonheid van de taal dat ik niets meer ga zeggen in het Nederlands. Now, some of you may recognize me. I used to be Howard Gutman. That's okay. You laughed at the Dutch, not at the joke in English. This will be a bad time if we don't follow along in the English jokes too. But it really is truly an exciting day for Belgium. It's an exciting day for speeches. 2 Americans on the same day. One, an unbelievably popular government official, handsome, whose visit to Belgium was awaited with great anticipation. And the other, Barack Obama. There we go, we did better, there we go, all right. I really am delighted to be here today, and I didn't quite realize how delighted I would be till I got here. I was delighted in coming to have a chance to share some thoughts and to answer some of your questions. I always enjoy speaking with Rotary groups, and I always enjoy coming to Genk. And so I was looking forward to it. But I've found in the last hour that it's far better than I thought, because I got to meet so many of you. I will get myself in trouble if I say I've heard that people from Limburg are the nicest in Belgium versus people here, but it's a fabulous, fabulous group. And thanks so much for opening your arms. So for that, I have to thank my dear friend, Tom Lennartz, for inviting me today and for a truly wonderful introduction. I also got a chance to meet Tom's parents, his mom and dad. I'd love to acknowledge them. Where are you? There they are. Good, terrific. Tom started as a business associate who I knew through the embassy and then through work, but he and his terrific wife, Anique, have become friends of Michelle's and mine. Michelle and Anique are both dentists, so we share much in common, which reminds me to introduce the best former ambassadrice Belgium has ever had, my bride, Michelle, who's over there. Now, as Tom mentioned, we left officially about 7.5 months ago, and this is our 11th trip back to Belgium. You see, when you leave Belgium, you leave a little bit of your heart right here. So we come back about 1 week per month. I'm on the board of some Belgium companies, and always looking for more board seats, by the way. We come back for consulting projects, and while I'm doing the advertisements, always looking for more consulting projects. And we come back to do venture capital projects with young Belgians, who last week I took 2 young Belgians to Silicon Valley. They are the smartest commercial drone manufacturers you'll ever see, but they didn't know how to get to Silicon Valley, so we showed them. I come back for speeches, but we also come back to see friends. We come back for weddings. We come back to share family joys. We even come back for funerals. You see, when you spend 4 years in Belgium, you make friends here for life. So tonight gives me a really good chance to share some thoughts, primarily about 2 of my favorite places, places to be admired, places that sometimes can be a little hard to understand, sometimes not quite in the lockstep. Those 2 places are, of course, Belgium and the United States. Now, the third other wacky place is the world, and as Tom said, I love to talk as well about Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel, and the Middle East, and China, and Ukraine. But they asked me to speak for roughly an hour. That would be double my longest speech ever anyway. But if I covered the rest of those, we'd be here next week. So I'm going to address Belgium and the United States, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. People sometimes say, well, don't you screen questions? If I can't answer them, I shouldn't have been the U.S. ambassador. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about anything else as well, including the world. But we should be able to cover some potentially interesting questions that I bet you've either never heard before or no one's ever been willing to answer them before. Questions like, who will be the next president of the United States and the next vice president? Questions like, did I ever read Herman van Rompuy's or Didier Reynders or Peter de Krem's mail? Or did I listen in on their phone calls? Questions like, why is Poland going to be one of the very most important countries in Europe in the next 5 years? Questions like, how does Parma ham and French singers possibly threaten the economic future of Belgium and of Europe? Questions like, What is the difference between Jan de Nul and my 25-year-old son back in Washington, D.C.? Why is Belgium the most politically united country in the world? Boy, I lost you already. You haven't reacted. You didn't. If you don't react to that one, the first time I gave that, some of you may have heard it already. First time I tried that one in Leuven, they didn't react at all. And I said, I better repeat that line because I'm sure you think I misspoke. I'm going to answer why Belgium is the most politically united country in the world. And then they all said, oh, we thought you misspoke. So questions like, what brand known to every Belgian is very hot, white hot in the United States, but remains much cooler in Belgium? What are the 3 worst words to say in Belgium? And could life have been different if Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, if he had attended Leuven instead of Harvard? Now that should last us a while until we get to your questions. Does anyone feel like leaving yet? All right, we got it there. So let me recap just quickly, and Tom's done a great job. I served as the United States ambassador for roughly 4 years. It did make us the 3rd longest serving U.S. ambassador of Belgium in over 100 years. That's because U.S. ambassadors are supposed to stay 3 years. U.S. ambassadors always change over 3 years. But the ones that Obama picked at the end, he knew the election was coming up. He would never get another ambassador. So he called 20 of us and said, stay a 4th year and I'll cover it when the State Department yells at you. So he asked us to stay the 4th year, which is why we did. And the embassy and I were proud of many accomplishments. We were basically proud to have helped change the very nature of the Belgian-American relationship. You see, when we got here at the start of the Obama administration, which had just followed the end of the Bush administration, despite the history between the 2 countries as the dearest of allies, the bonds that had formed over the 2 world wars, truth be told, the relationship between the United States and Belgium at that time was described in the press as frosty. As a result of policy differences, primarily the war in Iraq, searching for weapons of mass destruction that seemed not to exist, the Belgian government had considered and made plans to close the port of Antwerp to U.S. ships, had considered and made plans to close Belgian airspace to U.S. planes, and had begun to take actions to indict our Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, in Belgium under the law of universal jurisdiction. There was also tension between Belgium and the United States over the United States' decision to walk out of the Kyoto climate talks. So when I first arrived in Belgium, I tried to see each of the ministers, and Paul Magnet, then the energy minister, would not see me. He had not seen my predecessor, and he had not seen his predecessor. And it was about the U.S. reliance on coal, which he rightly feared could destroy the planet. So I had to work through Andre Flau to convince Andre that I wasn't a bad guy, who could tell them Paul that I wasn't a bad guy, and I could get to see the energy minister. After we talked for a while, we became good friends, and we remained good friends for the full 4 years. And when I was doing my goodbyes, we'll get to that story a little later, but when I was doing my goodbyes, I came and said, Paul, I'm not sure I should talk to you, because you're now burning American coal. The world had changed, but our friendship had not. So for whatever reason it was been, when we got here, shortly after the end of the Bush administration, the start of the Obama administration, the fact was that the United States and Belgium had gotten off track with each other. The U.S. had faltered in the minds and in the hearts of the citizens of Belgium. Our government had separated from the people, and that became clear in the data. So the Gallup polling group, they do polls of all sorts, they started in 2007 to track public opinion in every country in the world concerning U.S. leadership and America. And in that first poll taken in 2007 about what you feel about U.S. leadership in America, the results in Belgium were that we got 8% favorable, 65% unfavorable, and 27% no opinion. Think about that. 8-1 unfavorable. 8 times more unfavorable than favorable. So when I got here, it was pretty clear there was a call to change what we were doing and to rebuild the partnership. Now, it wasn't about then, and it's never been about a popularity contest. It's about results. Because when citizens are frosty and cynical, politicians will threaten to close ports or airspace or bring indictments or not talk to you about climate. In that world of cynicism and mistrust, both American interests and Belgian interests and any interest around the Belgian-American relationship will suffer. I know the American expats no longer talked about there being American expats when they talked to their neighbors. I know that American tourists would not wear their Boston Red Sox t-shirts in the Grand Place. They didn't want to get in an argument. Or they'd carry their guidebook in English face down to avoid arguments. And American businesses really did not promote the fact at that time that they were American businesses. And I know that the embassy had frustration. We had to find our way in to see energy ministers. So in that yesterday, we had lost our way with one another. We talked past each other. And plainly, we failed to look each other in the eye. Now, the one thing I know for darn sure is we can't go back there again. That yesterday has to fade as every tomorrow grows brighter. We should not return to that yesterday no matter who leads Belgium, no matter what May elections bring or 5 Mays from now bring. We should not go back there no matter who leads the United States. We should not go back there no matter who the ambassador, no matter whether he studies or she studies Dutch and French every other day and visits all 589 cities, villages, and communes, or whether they sit in the office. We should not go back there. You see, my predecessor, Ambassador Sam Fox, a dedicated ambassador, and President George Bush, they didn't define America. And Howard Gutman or Denise Bauer and Barack Obama, we don't define America. America is the 310 million citizens dedicated to the exact same values shared by the 11 million Belgians: freedom, democracy, respect for our fellow men and women and for the brotherhood of citizenship, love of family, pride of work, curiosity about tomorrow, and so much more. America is never about the man or the woman standing at the lectern giving the speech. It's always about the people in the audience. And yet, you think, why is he bothering to say that? Sure, that was the George Bush time, that's past. How easy is it to slip back there? Well, just think about what you and your neighbors started saying when you heard that America was spying. You were being told that America was spying, that Ms. Merkel's cell phone had been listened to. And you'll see how easy it could be to slip back there yet again. Could those bonds between our countries be threatened once again? Now, I cannot comment on what the geniuses from MIT or the geniuses in China or in France, how they gather things and who they listen to or what anybody else is listening to. You live in Brussels, someone, hello? You live in Belgium, hello? You live in Genk, hello? We're probably being listened to it all the time, but I can't comment about what they do. I can't talk about confidential information. I can't go near classified information. But I can talk about my relationship with Belgium and its leaders in the exact same way that Barack Obama explained then his relationship with the world, which is I decided early on in the ambassadorship that the best way to represent the United States in Belgium was to secure wins for both countries. I would only do things that were in the interest of both countries. Neither of us could truly profit if it was at the expense of the other partner. So I simply never read anything that would betray the trust of Belgium or of my friends, and I was never required to. President Obama explained when he was asked that if he wanted to know what Chancellor Merkel thought about something, about Afghanistan or the economic recovery, he would just ask her. That's all he had to do. And back then as ambassador, the Standard de Liège games, I would sit between Prime Minister Leterme and then Foreign Minister Reinders. I would go to the 19th Put in Canoka on Sundays and have coffee with Peter de Crème. I wore silly party hats with the elastic under your chin and blowers every New Year's Eve with Herman Van Rompuy. He said, never put those pictures on Facebook. I considered almost all the Belgian cabinet members good friends. I'd have a cup of coffee whenever I needed to. So if I ever needed to know anything, I too would just ask them. I never needed to do more, and I did not. So we can never slip back to those days of distrust and 8% approval ratings, but it's easy to happen if you don't focus on that. And in rebuilding the relationship during the 4 years that I was with the embassy, the path of change for our embassy was as identifiable as the path of destruction had been. It almost always is. You just need to figure out the causes of the problems and try to react with the solutions. So when we first got here in 2009, we candidly admitted that the Belgian-American relationship had suffered. And I then explained the values of the president who sent me here, Barack Obama. And by the way, Michelle and I saw him about 3 weeks ago. He crashed a party of 11 of the returning ambassadors for a semi-reunion. We didn't know he was coming, but he came in and he spent about 45 minutes thanking everybody for their service, first together and then with each of us. And we got to talk about how terrific Belgium had been. But then we came to Belgium and we talked about the values of the president who sent me here. We promised to be better listeners and better learners and to rebuild the partnership where it had suffered most with the people. We outlined our plans to rebuild by studying both French and Dutch, by visiting all the people, and by that I meant all 589 cities, towns, and villages. And you can see pictures of 589 visits on my website still. And we kept our word, and we kept our promises. We visited every city. We studied both languages all 4 years. We made well over 100 television appearances in Belgium. And by the way, if you're free around 9 o'clock tomorrow, I'm on Rainsderlap tomorrow night. We went to carnivals and we went to war memorials. We participated for the first time in the commemoration at Mortsel of the tragic bombing. We held iftar dinners for the Muslim community. At the same time, we won the European Jewish Community Award for our service to the Jewish community. I even got a visit from a high-level official who had been sent from Turkey, sent by Prime Minister Erdogan, asking me to open back-channel negotiations between Turkey and Israel during the flotilla dispute. When I explained that to Washington, it did not get a great reception as to why the U.S. ambassador to Belgium would be mediating Turkey and Israel. But to Turkey, at least, it made some sense. So we were proud of our accomplishments. And we saw the results. That first year after Secretary Clinton and President Obama were in office, the international polls went up everywhere. But you know, the second year, a bit due to Afghanistan fatigue and the Eurozone crisis, the polls through Europe generally slid back in that 2012 poll. So the favorability rating began to slip in Europe. But our embassy was proud to note that in that same 2012 poll, Belgium finished first in the world, 183 countries. Belgium finished first in the world with the highest gain in favorability rating towards America and U.S. leadership. There was another 16% gain in favorability, so that the 8-to-1 unfavorable, the 865, now stands at more than 2-to-1 favorable, 46-22, which means that Belgians view American leadership today more favorably than Americans view American leadership, or Belgians view Belgian leadership. And again, it was never about a popularity contest. With the change in public opinion came the change in action. Compare the difference between the reception in Iraq with Belgium's efforts in Afghanistan, or in Syria, or in Libya, and so much more. Rebuild a partnership, and they will come. And the change meant that there are Boston Red Sox T-shirts back in the Grand Place. Guidebooks are now carried face up, not face down. American tourists are proud to talk about their country when they meet Belgians. Expats mention that they're from the United States, and U.S. businesses here often recruit employees and customers by flagging their U.S. roots. I can't tell you how many young Belgians, good entrepreneurs, are trying to get their way to Boston or Silicon Valley, and how many young Belgians now apply for masters in the United States. The relationship is popular again. Belgium is now the 9th largest investor in the world in the United States. And Belgian subsidiaries of Belgian companies in the United States create more jobs in the United States than American companies create in Belgium. 160,000 to 138,000. It's in the White House release today. So the relation is tight. The embassy finds smiles at the door. And as the White House said today, the relationship has never been better. So we turn to our relationship. Where does the United States stand today economically and politically, and where does Belgium stand economically and politically? Is he really going to answer all those? Where are we headed? Are we more alike than different? Well, as to America, although there is still a bit of political cloud cover, although the skies can seem somewhat gray from the smog of our politics, I think to a large extent our economy consists largely of sunny skies. While some people viewed America as defined by a 3-year economic crisis, I always tended to view that there was a 1-year crisis that was solved, and then 3 or 4 or now 5 years of political bickering and crisis and stalemate that largely mask how well the economics were resolved. After the crisis first hit, like Europe, America quickly fixed the financial regulation problems and restored the confidence in banks. We took our lumps. That's something that people in Belgium don't realize. We took our lumps for a while to be better on the other side. So our housing market crashed, and to some extent, the industries that had overly profited from the false financial regulation crashed as well. So we suffered for a while. Some industries, like the auto industry, had never responded to the shrinking demand. So we had to go through a painful course correction, the collapse of housing prices in many states, the closure and downsizing of businesses in the U.S., a huge rise in unemployment. For example, Ford in America had shed 22% of its U.S. domestic capacity between 2006 and 2009. That fact is rarely understood. So we got our layoffs through 2006 and 2009 in a painful time. Detroit collapsed. Many of our cities collapsed. But we got through to the other side, and we relatively solved how quickly housing market and businesses had rise, just like we solved our financial regulation. And then we solved the biggest and most difficult problem, which was the energy problem. Back then, we had been totally dependent on foreign oil, and we had runaway energy costs. Much the same way that Europe is still far too dependent on energy from Russia and still has runaway energy costs. Back then, we were borrowing from the Chinese to pay $800 million a day for foreign oil, for sometimes paying to parties that were not always our closest allies, with the result of costly energy, with the result of not investing in creating new jobs, with the result of undermining our national security, watching our carbon footprint soar, angering our allies like Paul Magnet, and making things difficult for American manufacturing. You see, when you have high labor costs like we did and high energy costs, no matter how much ingenuity you have, it's hard to control your own manufacturing. And we solved that problem as well. Maybe we were just lucky. We found out that using a technique known as fracking, we were actually sitting on a game-changing energy source of natural gas. Or maybe we were, instead of being lucky, good enough to realize we were lucky. You have to know sometimes to be good enough to know when you're lucky. But either way, by turning to natural gas that we had long sat upon but were unable to secure, we have hugely reduced our dependence on foreign oil. And by 2015 to 2020, we will be the largest energy producer in the world and a net exporter of energy. And because natural gas has 50% of the carbon footprint of oil, we will have reduced our carbon more than any country that stayed in Kyoto over those intervening years. And because of these changes in energy and the course correction, manufacturing is coming back to America. In the East, where we used to not be able to be competitive, labor costs are beginning to rise and they can't control their energy costs. So manufacturing is coming back to America and is on a boom. It is now cheaper today to build a Mercedes-Benz in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and ship it to a buyer in Stuttgart, Germany, than it is to make it in Stuttgart, Germany, the home of Mercedes-Benz, and to ship it next door. Other than the VAT and the tariffs. Other than the VAT and the tariffs, because our energy costs are 1/3 to 1/2 as small as Germany and Europe. Now, this is a really important, don't lose me, because it's a really important issue for Europe and for Belgium. Because labor costs certainly are no cheaper in Europe and in Belgium than in America. And if energy costs 2 to 3 times more here, it will be hard for Europe and for Belgium to manufacture and to compete in sectors that depend on energy. Certainly, we've seen those sectors that depend on energy, like chemicals, begin to invest more of their net worth in the United States. Solvay took a major portion of their assets and bought a U.S. chemical company that made the chemical used for fracking. So they've already made the transfer. We've seen heavy manufacturing, automobiles and heavy manufacturing jobs move back home. So the U.S. unemployment, which was over 10% during the crisis, is now down to 6.7%, and the housing prices have soared. During the crisis, Belgians used to ask me what they should buy in the U.S., where should they invest, and I used to always answer without fail, buy the state of Florida, because everything in Florida had collapsed and everything was on sale. Florida is no longer on sale. Now, things could and should be even brighter for the U.S. Unfortunately, regardless of how well things truly are going economically, we are largely broken politically. It is nasty in Washington, believe me, I know as well as anybody. So even with American real economic prosperity, we still have the fiscal cliff, the debt ceiling, the sequester. Our government shut because we couldn't have a budget. So we couldn't even run the government. We couldn't provide, and still disagree about providing, basic medical insurance to all. And we have so many other stalemates. So we have, to some extent, masked our own recovery with our politics. And so where we stand today is a strengthening economy and a shaky political platform. And that's where we are as we speak today. But because world economies are largely one big boat, we either rise together or fall together. That recovery has aided Europe and Belgium. We can buy more, and we are buying more. So Belgian exports to the United States last year were up 40%, and they are still booming. Which brings me to the answer to another one of those questions we mentioned at the start. What brand known to every Belgian is white hot in the United States, but remains much cooler in Belgium? The brand is Belgium. Bars in the United States post signs on sidewalks even when they're illegal, advertising that they carry Belgian beer. Grocery stores have huge signs all over proclaiming, for example, new Belgian beer and similar phrases. Only the beers are made in Pennsylvania and they have nothing to do with Belgium. The value is in the name. Fancy restaurants no longer carry just waffles anywhere in the United States. They are always Belgian waffles, though again, they have nothing to do with Belgium. When I met recently at the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C. with the new Belgian ambassador to the U.S., Johan Verbeke, I was making that point. We then turned to our menus, and on the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C., for the breakfast menu, there's only one country mentioned on the menu, and that's Belgium. They had genuine Belgian waffles. There was not a Belgian to be found anywhere in that restaurant. Belgian restaurants are popping up all over the United States. And in fact, my younger son goes to Columbia University. It's on Broadway in Manhattan. There's food places around, but they also have vendor trucks. And the vendors get licenses for when they can be there. The longest lines are on Monday, because on Monday the vendor truck is waffles and dingas. There is not a single student at Columbia University who knows what a dinga is. You had to study Flemish for 4 years like me. I turn and say, waffles and dingas, are you kidding me? My son said, I don't know what a dinga is, but the line is endless. It's the most popular truck. And chocolate served in America always claim to be Belgian, regardless of who made them and where they're served. In the US, Belgium is a white-hot brand. And here, let's move on. Now, if the US is doing so well and Belgium has high energy and labor costs, should we worry about Belgium? I worry about some places in Europe. You see, the world economy is tied together. We truly either all rise together or none of us can. We are each other's markets and partners. So if some suffer, we will all suffer. But I do not worry about Belgium. Unless Europe solves its energy problems, perhaps through fracking in Poland or the UK or France. France has recently approved fracking by announcing that they were banning fracking again due to how well their propane tests have been. Propane is waterless fracking. So the French announced that they have banned fracking by approving fracking. But unless they solve their energy problems by either fracking in Poland or the UK or France or Ukraine, Spain and maybe Belgium, it would be Eastern Belgium, Belgium will have a hard time without some fix on the energy costs in manufacturing, which, by the way, is the answer to the question why Poland will be one of the very most important countries in Europe during the next 5 years. They have gas. They've replaced their ministers in charge with the ministers who believe in those techniques, and they've just granted tax incentives for companies who come and do it now. So they may be the key to solving the European energy problem. But regardless, even with the energy challenges, I don't worry about Belgium, because Belgium will continue to grow, to thrive, and to expand as an economy, because it is a knowledge economy. I have seen the Belgian engineers, the medical researchers, the Belgian inventors, and far more. We will solve Alzheimer's in the next 5 years, and when it's done, it will be the product of a joint venture between really smart people from Belgium and really smart people from the US. I've met them. Cancer treatments are changing every day, typed to particular genes. That's from really smart people in Belgium, working with really smart people in America. I'm working with 2 Belgian startups. One produces the best commercial drones. Silicon Valley's been throwing money at American companies, and they ain't seen nothing until you see the Belgian product. These young Belgian guys had already built and sold a robotics cameraman company. The other company is a new way to access the heart for cardiac repairs. Geniuses will long come from Belgium, and there will be plenty of room to grow. But with greater focus on innovation, creation, and entrepreneurship comes a need to begin to develop a stronger entrepreneurship mentality. To develop an entrepreneurship mentality designed for 2014. So what are the 3 worst words to say in Belgium? What words should be outlawed? Those words are, we're just Belgian. I would fine anyone who ever again said, well, we're just Belgian. And that's the problem of the 2014 entrepreneurship mentality. In that mentality, if Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, had attended Leuven instead of Harvard, Facebook today would still be an on-campus communication tool instead of one of the largest companies in the world, because he'd say we're just Belgian. But of course, there are Mark Zuckerbergs in Leuven every day, and instead of developing on-campus communication tools, why not develop one of the largest companies in the world? Which brings us to the difference between Jan de Nul and my 25-year-old son, and virtually every other young American entrepreneur. The de Nul companies do wonderfully, with a turnover, I believe, of roughly €2 billion a year. It's basically owned by 2 brothers, no public shareholders, no IPOs. They take that $2 billion of euros each year and put in a big bag and walk down to the store that sells ships, and they buy ships for cash, a fleet of dozens and dozens of ships and no debt. And that's running a Belgian company. It's a beautiful model. It's fabulous. Compare it to the young American entrepreneur like my son. In year 1, they borrow $50 million and lose $50 million. So in year 2, they borrow $25 million and lose $25 million. So in year 3, they borrow $12.5 million and lose $12.5 million, and then they go public. because they've cut their losses in half by each year, so they can now go public for millions of dollars with an IPO. Now, it's a bit of an exaggeration in those two extremes, but you see the point there. And that kind of buying, financing, entrepreneurship mentality will help lead to the growth in Belgium because the engineers are here, the technology is here, the researchers are here, the inventors are here. Given Belgium's record of producing engineers and scientists and America's thirst in Silicon Valley or in Boston or in the tech corridor in Washington, it seems to me that there were two obvious solutions for the best way ahead. Either Belgium could become the 51st state of the United States, or the United States could become the fourth region in Belgium, and we could then have a visit from Minister President Obama. Before we leave economics, let's talk really briefly, I don't want to lose you all, about the free trade negotiations ongoing right now between Europe and the United States. If due to differences in energy prices, it's cheaper today to make a Mercedes-Benz in Tuscaloosa than in Stuttgart, other than the VAT and the tariffs. And what about when a free trade agreement is reached and the VAT and the tariffs go away? Won't that make the disparity in manufacturing due to energy differences much greater? Won't that hurt Europe and help the US? And won't Belgium lose more in manufacturing? What's Belgium going to get out of a new trade agreement? Those are valid questions and valid concerns. And before I express some views, let me make a disclosure. I'll make a disclaimer. Stay awake. I want everyone to have heard this because I don't want to get attacked later. I work for certain Belgian companies that have an interest in these issues. So someone could say I'm biased, but I've had these thoughts for a long time. So clearly, free trade makes good sense for everyone. With the world getting smaller, with Belgium having created more jobs in America than America created in Belgium, but both of us creating a heck of a lot of jobs in each other's country, you've got to have free trade. Protectionism hurts all, and everyone will be helped by a free trade agreement. There is no question about that. Protectionism limits markets and stymies innovation, so all will benefit in the long run. But with the energy disparity, the removal of tariffs and VAT will help the manufacturing sector in the US where energy costs are lower. In such areas where the US has an economic or operational advantage, it's going to gain jobs. Europe and Belgium will lose jobs where it has an economic or operational disadvantage. So at least the playing field should be level. If you're going to get rid of protectionism, VAT and tariffs where it protects manufacturing, you ought to get rid of protectionism in areas where Belgium has superior advantage in operations. Those doors should be opened as well. Now, the one area I know that Belgium and the Netherlands have the greatest advantage is dredging. The four largest dredging companies in the world are located in Belgium and the Netherlands, and they have ships that can do jobs faster and cheaper than companies in the United States who have never invested in those kind of ships. Under current US law, foreign ships owned by foreign companies, even using fully American crews, cannot operate in the US. So opening the doors allows a win-win. There would be more ports, more dredging in the US, faster and cheaper, so more projects. They can use American crews because visa requirements will require it. It should be win-win. That should be real helpful. That should help create jobs, offset by some of the losses. That's what free trade is about. Surely the free trade negotiation can yield that easy result, giving Belgium its side of the free trade negotiations while the US gets its side. Just removing the protectionist tariffs, removing the bars to dredging, and everyone benefits. Have you ever heard of anybody talking about dredging in the context of the free trade agreement? Have you seen any editorials or heard the media or Belgian officials? Has anyone explained that we could increase US jobs because the jobs cost less and are done faster and still allow Belgian companies to profit? Instead, Europe is focused elsewhere. The French screamed about champagne and protecting French singers. Italy screamed about Parma ham. I bet you were wondering how I was going to get back to the Parma ham as threatening the Belgian economy. So Europe's fighting sometimes for singers and Parma ham and champagne, while multi-billion-dollar Euro industries, where there is a competitive advantage, seem to be quiet. Now, maybe it's under the radar. Maybe it's all working well. But I just throw the questions out there. Without actions from Dutch and Belgian officials, media, and businesses, we'll hope for the best. But truly, I look forward to a world with truly free trade, and we will both be rising. I owe you a couple of quick thoughts on politics and then can turn to your questions. I never worry about Belgian politics because Belgium is the most politically united country in the world. Is he really going to try this one? You see, I come from a country that is truly politically divided. The vote in our last election, Obama-Romney, was 52% to 48%. And that split, 52-48, basically mirrors the split on every major issue of the day. My country's divided 52-48. On abortion and a woman's rights to choose. On gay marriage. On the importance of climate change and whether they believe in the science of climate change. On whether 40 million people should have medical coverage or be allowed to be uninsured. On the proper role for America in the world. On every major issue of the world, I come from a country divided 52-48. But there basically are not two Belgians who disagree on any of the issues I just recited or any other major issue in the world of the day. Indeed, in that last election, when the U.S. divided 52-48 for Obama versus Romney, Belgium polled 98-2 for Obama. That was the most one-sided score in the world. And by polling 98-2 for Obama, that made Belgium the most politically united country in the world. It took me a minute and a half to turn all of you around. You never knew you lived in the most politically united country in the world. Having taken care of Belgium, let's turn finally, one last time, to American politics. Because I've answered every question that I posed at the start. Check your notes. But one. Who will be the president in 2016? Belgians ask me every day whether Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States. And I will give you the answer if you answer me just one question. I can tell you with 100% certainty whether Hillary Clinton will get elected in 2016 if you will tell me what 2016 will look like. Because you see, I think the biggest mistake that business leaders make and political leaders make and the media make is they plan and predict the future based on assuming the facts of the present. So we've got to understand what that future is going to look like. You can only plan for the future by envisioning what that future will look like. And those are the very questions that we've discussed this evening. Now, I have some ideas what the future will look like, and you've given me a terrific opportunity to share some of them with you this evening. I wish all of you the brightest of futures for you and your loved ones, growing maybe just a little bit brighter each day. And I know that for Michelle and me, as long as we get time to spend in both countries that we love, ours will have at least two very bright lights ahead. I'm happy to take questions if there's time. So thanks so much, and all the best.